Ask a woman her age, a man his salary, or an F1 fan what happened on Sunday the 12th of December 2021. Yes, we're going there today. Abu Dhabi is this weekend after all, so I felt this was appropriate. But for the love of God, please do not start fights about this race in the comments. Debating is fine, of course, there is nothing wrong with healthy debating. But fighting, leave it on Twitter, please. Just don't be a wanker, okay? The stakes heading into race day really could not have been higher if you tried. Point 1, it was the last race of the season. Point 2, the drivers' and constructors' titles were both yet to be decided. Point 3, Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton were tied on points. On point 4, they were set to start the race alongside each other on the front row. They were also set to start on different tyre compounds. Hamilton on the mediums, meaning he'd be able to go longer into the race before stopping if he so pleased to, while Verstappen had to start on the softs, which should have given him an advantage off the line. That and pole position. Really, it was anyone's game though. A winner-takes-all scenario. I mind in the run-up to this race weekend, there was talk online of something along the lines of, oh, what if Max just crashes in Bathurst, because if they finish tyre on points, he'll get the title and count back. But that didn't happen, thankfully. What also didn't happen was Max leading into turn 1, because despite being on the mediums, Hamilton, who'd won the last 3 straight races, charged forward for second to attack the lead immediately. Verstappen did make a move to retake the lead at turn 6 though, diving in the inside with a last of the late breakers kind of move, which resulted in Hamilton having to gain off and cut the chicane after they'd nearly come together in the whole thing, meaning Hamilton was able to keep the lead. And now, unsurprisingly, Red Bull wasn't happy about this, so wanted him to give the place back to Verstappen. And to be fair, yeah, the Dutchman was just ahead at the apex due to the aforementioned dive and a half. But the stewards deemed that no action was required because they said any advantage gained was given back. So with Red Bull having to like it or lump it over the lap 1 incident, the race went on. Hamilton continued to lead, pulling away for a bit for Verstappen in P2, who was just under no threat behind because the guy in P3 was Sergio Perez, who was not going to attack him. The gap sat around 2 seconds or so for quite a few laps, but as they ticked away, Hamilton pulled away more, and soon the gap was about 5 seconds. And they do help by being on the mediums, which could last longer than the softs that Max was on. But sooner or later, the pits would need to be visited for both of them, and Verstappen was the first one to blink, pulling in for a new set of hards at the end of lap 13. Now, luckily for him, he managed to exit ahead of the second Mercedes of Bottas, and also the Ferrari of Leclerc, who had a bit of a code brown moment, which, look, in the moment in the car, that would have been, as I just said, a bit of a code brown. But looking back, I will never not laugh at this clip. Verstappen did exit behind Norris, but it took him all of half a lap or so to get past him, so he had free air after that to try and be closer to Hamilton once the Brit made his pit stop, which he did at the end of the 14th lap of the race. Now, in the pits, he only lost 1 place, to a car that hadn't stopped yet, that was 11.5 seconds ahead, and this ordinarily would not have been an issue. However, that place he lost was to the second Red Bull of Sergio Perez. That is an issue, and the gap between him and Hamilton started coming down as Verstappen closed up and got a little bit stuck behind Sainz, but Verstappen finally cleared the Ferrari on lap 18, by which point the gap between him and Hamilton was now growing. Actually, due to being stuck, it had grown to 8 seconds. But as I said, the gap between Hamilton and Perez had been coming down and was now just 4 seconds as Red Bull deployed the team tactics. Lap 20 rolled around now with Hamilton right behind the Mexican, who proceeded to park the entirety of Mexico on every apex over the next lap and a half to back Hamilton up and allow Max, who was 8.5 seconds behind, to close up. Hamilton did manage to over-attack through the chicane between the straights and was ahead upon starting to make their way down that second back straight, but Perez had DRS, which allowed him to get back past. Hamilton tried to get past, he tried to sneak his way past the Red Bull through sector 3, but Perez just wasn't having any of it. He earned his nickname the Mexican Minister of Defense. Through the third sector alone, at the start of which the gap was around 7 seconds, Perez's holding up managed to halve the gap between Hamilton and Verstappen. Just over 3.5 seconds or so between the pairs, they started lap 21. When Hamilton finally cleared Perez for good into turn 6, Perez letting Max by into turn 9, the gap was down to just over a second. Max dubbed Checo a legend and then said about trying to stay with Hamilton, but that didn't quite work. because Hamilton started to pull away again, and within a few laps the gap was over 2 seconds, and it just kept steadily growing, up to 5 seconds come lap 33, and 6 seconds by the time the leaders were coming to the end of the 35th lap, which is when Giovinazzi pulled off with a failure, which pulled out the virtual safety car, under which you had Total Wolff getting on the blower to the race director Michael Massey, asking them to not make it a full safety car. Now, it is a known fact that the virtual safety car can do some strange things with gaps, depending on how quickly or slowly drivers react to the start and end, where gaps between drivers can grow or shrink under it. This time was no different, the gap between Hamilton and Verstappen growing by a second with the starting of the VSC. Lewis stayed out, not having the gap behind to do a free pit stop if Max stayed out, but Red Bull did opt to box Max as they had a big enough gap behind, meaning he still exited in P2, but now 23 seconds behind, though he had much fresher hards on his car now. So when the virtual safety car ended towards the start of lap 38, Verstappen had his work cut out, 19 seconds or so to close in 20 laps. Nothing to lose then, really. Hamilton, meanwhile, did quip on the radio that it was a bit of a risk leaving him out, and it was, but Mercedes had made their bed, so knew they had to lie in it. So at this point, all they and Lewis could do was just do enough to try and make sure Max didn't end up 1 right behind them and 2 overtake them. Max Verstappen did close in as the laps ticked down, but he just wasn't closing quickly enough to be able to catch and pass Hamilton by the end of the race. On lap 50 of 58, the gap was still over 10 seconds, and he still had backmarker traffic that Lewis had already cleared to get through. Christian Horner was saying when talking to Crofty and Co during the race that the Mercedes was just too quick, and that Max was driving his heart out, but they needed a miracle. Mercedes was just too quick for Red Bull in terms of race pace, and as it was looking at this point, Lewis Hamilton was going to become the first ever 8-time F1 World Drivers' Champion. But then shit hit the fan. Latifi crashed in the final sector on lap 53 of 58 to pull out a late race safety car, which is not what Mercedes and Hamilton would have wanted, as Hamilton had a 12-second lead, which now would be wiped out. What's more, they didn't box. They would have lost track position if they did, and Max didn't thanks to Checo's aforementioned defending. But Verstappen did pit for soft tyres, and now he was going to be a lot closer to Hamilton, who was on aging hards that had been on since his pit stop at the end of lap 14 for the restart. Providing it did restart, that is. Now, as it stood as they all started lining up behind the safety car, there was 5 lapped runners sitting in between Hamilton and Verstappen. Norris, Alonso, Ocon, Leclerc, and Vettel. Now, if they were gonna get racing again with getting lapped cars out of the way and unlapped, what should have happened is that all the cars that were lapped should have been told to go past everyone, past the safety car, and then a lap or so later the safety car comes in. It would have been tight for all that to happen in the 5 or so laps left, but if they were quick about it, then it would have been possible. But that ain't what happened. What proceeded to happen was a few laps of utter confusion, really, as no one quite knew if it was going to restart or not. It took until lap 56 for everybody to be bunched up, at which point lapped runners still needed to unlap, unless the race director opted to not allow anyone to unlap, which he could have. And that's the message that got posted on lap 56. Lapped runners would not be allowed to unlap themselves, meaning there'd be 5 lapped runners between Hamilton and Verstappen. So if things did restart heading onto the last lap, it would be 1 lap of racing with 5 lapped cars between the title contenders. And even though they'd have been blue flagged out the way and Max had new softs, surely still just too big of an ask. Hamilton, still it would have been his title. Understandably, Red Bull were not too happy about how things were playing out. Horner was on the blower to Massey, questioning why they weren't getting lapped runners out the way, quipping that you just need 1 racing lap. But it looked like this was the state of play. 1 racing lap, providing it did come in at the end of lap 57, with no one unlapping. But then shit hit the fan again. Lap 57 to 58, heading down the second back straight. Norris, Alonso, Ocon, Leclerc, and Vettel, the 5 cars that sat between Lewis and Max on the road, were told to unlap, and just those 5. And then, the safety car ending this lap message came. Only the 5 lapped cars that previously sat between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen unlapped, leaving the pair, Lewis on old hards and Max on new softs, alongside each other with just 1 lap of racing to decide the title. Where was the rules and regulations book in all this? Well, clearly it was thrown out the damn window. And that last lap, well, we all know what happened. Max went for it down the inside of turn 5, and made it stick. Despite a cramp in his leg, Hamilton tried to come back on the back straight. They came close to touching in the process, but he just couldn't do it. Max Verstappen won the race, and with it, the championship. While Toto Wolff during the last lap was giving the radio message that's now infamous, telling Michael Masi that was so not right. The fallout after all this? It was a mess. On the social media side of things, the team Verstappen were understandably celebrating that their driver had won the championship for the first time. Team LH were understandably pissed that their driver had lost his 8th championship on the last lap. I remember the terms human error champion and Mickey Mouse champion being thrown around. Human error champion is the one I saw missed because, it was later said, I believe, that human error was a contributing factor in all this, which, yeah, it was. But on the non-social media side of things, reaction-wise, Mercedes, unsurprisingly, protested the race result. First of all, about Max overtaking under the safety car there just before the restart, but that got thrown out because they ruled that, he was not ahead when the safety car ended and all that. And then there was the whole thing about how things played out with the lapped runners and the safety car ending. That Michael Masi had violated safety car procedure. Now this got dismissed, but here is what the decision document on the matter says. The claims of Mercedes. Mercedes claimed that there were 2 breaches of the sporting regulation, Article 48.12, namely that to which states any cars that have been lapped by the leader will be required to pass the cars on the lead lap and the safety car. And once the last lapped car has passed the leader, the safety car will return to the pits at the end of the following lap. Mercedes argued that had this been complied with, car 44 would have won the race. They therefore requested the stewards to amend the classification under Article 11.9.3.8 of the FIA International Sporting Code. Red Bull's argument is in defense. Red Bull argued that 1. Any does not mean all, pointing out the obvious there, Red Bull. 2. The Article 48.13 of the sporting regulations states that the message safety car in this lap is the signal that it will enter the pits lane at the end of that lap. Again, you're pointing out the bloody obvious here, Red Bull. 3. The Article 48.13 overrides Article 48.12. 4. The Article 15.3 gives the race director overriding authority over the use of the safety car. And 5. That even if all cars that had been lapped, 8 in total, of which 5 were allowed to overtake the safety car, it would not have changed the outcome of the race. Race director's evidence. The race director stated that the purpose of Article 48.12 was to remove those lapped cars that would interfere in the racing between the leaders, and that in his view, Article 48.13 was the one that applied in this case. The race director also stated that it had long been agreed by all the teams that where possible, it was highly desirable for the race to end in a green condition, i.e. not under a safety car. Conclusion of the stewards. The stewards considered that the protest was admissible. Having considered the various statements made by the parties, the stewards determined the following. That Article 15.3 allows the race director to control the use of the safety car, which in our determination includes its deployment and withdrawal. But although Article 48.12 may not have been fully applied in relation to the safety car returning to the pits at the end of the following lap, Article 48.13 overrides that, and once the message safety car in this lap has been displayed, it is mandatory to withdraw the safety car at the end of that lap. But notwithstanding Mercedes' request that the stewards remediate the matter by amending the classification to reflect the positions at the end on the penultimate lap, but this is a step that the stewards believe is effectively shortening the race retrospectively and hence not appropriate. Accordingly, the protest is dismissed. The protest deposit is not refundable. This part here about lapped cars that would interfere with the racing between the leaders, so the leaders doesn't include third place, which was Carlos Sainz, which, gonna be honest, he had nothing to lose. He could have gone for the win. You know, the AlphaTauris and Bottas behind that. Leaders is more than just first and second, I'm just saying. Anyway, Mercedes did say they were gonna appeal this. However, they decided not to and soon announced they would not take their protest any further after the FIA announced it was gonna investigate the whole thing. And rightly so. Hamilton did still boycott the FIA prize-giving gala though and got fined for doing so. Michael Masi also got a lot of hate thrown his way in all this. And rather unsurprisingly, he got replaced as race director ahead of the 2022 season by 2 men who are both nail-anger in the role. Eduardo Freitas being ousted after the event of the 2022 Japanese Grand Prix, which left the role to just Niels Wittich, who just got replaced by Rui Marquez. Revolving door of race directors the last few years, I swear. Like, surely it's not a good look when you have 4 different race directors in the span of 3 years, right? And that, ladies and gents, is a nice reminder of why you never ask a woman her age, a man his salary, or an F1 fan what happened on Sunday the 12th of December 2021. Anyway, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Drop a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new around here. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.